Hi, everybody. Welcome in. It's the last session of the afternoon before the keynote. We're almost there. We can make it. Hi, my name is Carolyn Grabill. I'm a lead engineer at Salesforce on the team that makes custom metadata types.
And I'm Avrom Faderman. I'm an engineer at Salesforce until very recently on the cable, but I'm not anymore. Until very recently on the team that makes custom metadata types, and I was also their initial inventor.
We're very excited to be talking about custom metadata types from an admin perspective today. For a long time, it's been kind of more of a developer-focused feature, but we're taking the roadmap in more of an admin direction. I'm really excited to bring it to you from that perspective. Let's go on. We are Salesforce employees, so if you've been to a Salesforce event before, you've probably seen this slide. This is our forward-looking statement slide. We will be making some forward-looking statements today. We're going to be talking about our roadmap. If you are making purchasing decisions for Salesforce products, please make those decisions based on existing functionality as opposed to functionality coming out in the future. So what will we be talking about today? We will be talking about what are custom metadata types, defining them from an admin perspective. We'll go through some examples of how admins use them, and in particular, in our new functionality, using custom metadata types in validation rule formulas. Ooh, ah. And we'll have a demo of that. We'll talk a little bit about our roadmap, and then we'll have you some links to get started. So, what are custom metadata types? Who in the room knows what custom metadata types are? 2, 3, oh, more, several hands, awesome. Keep your hand up if you have created a record of a custom metadata type before. Those hands still up, awesome. Keep your hand up if you've created an entire type before, not just a record. All the same hands still, cool. For those of you who already know what custom metadata types are, I hope you'll gain a deeper understanding of how they work conceptually. For those of you who don't know what they are, awesome, you're in the right place. So what are custom metadata types? I got these slides from our PM. Custom metadata types take development on the platform to a whole new level. They are the biggest platform feature since Chatter. These are some Twitter comments we've gotten. They give you godlike developer superpowers. This is my favorite one. The holy freaking grail. But we don't just measure our product success on our Twitter comments. If we did, we'd probably be CTOs by now. But we measure them by metrics and by adoption. And we're really happy to say that custom metadata types are getting over 250 million queries per day on average. We actually had to update this slide recently. This number's going up. We're very proud of that. They're getting a lot of adoption, especially on the developer side and the ISV side, because they give you a lot of advantages in packaging. They make packaging installations and upgrades simpler. They make the manageability of moving metadata between organizations a lot simpler compared to previous features that were available. I don't expect you to read this whole slide. I just kind of expect you to go to the next slide. Sorry. Ooh. This is such a PM deck. But seriously, what is a custom metadata type? If I could show you only one slide, it would be this one. The records of custom metadata types are metadata, not data. And if you understand that distinction about custom metadata types as opposed to custom objects, the way that they work follows from that, and it becomes intuitive. So what does this mean from more of an admin setup perspective? To understand that, I want to ask you a question. What kinds of objects do we have in Salesforce? I'll take answers from the audience. There's two. Standard and custom. That is the answer I was expecting. And it's awesome. It's true. That's one way of slicing up the kinds of objects that we have in Salesforce. But as a developer and as an admin, there's another way. There's data objects, the objects that you use for your business, your accounts, your contacts, your opportunities, the stuff that your users use on a day-to-day basis, data objects. But then there are also metadata objects. These are the kinds of objects that control how the application works. They're the objects that you use when you work in setup. It's for the app. They're used by admins. And they're still records, but they're not business data records. So when you combine those two different ways of slicing up the kinds of objects that we have in Salesforce, you get this table. So I'm going to go through each of these quadrants. Oh, I love it when the phones come out. Jeez. So you get this table. On the top left, you have your standard data objects, the stuff that comes with Salesforce by default, your account, your opportunity, your contact. On the top right, you've got your custom data objects, the objects that you as an admin create because we at Salesforce can't possibly anticipate all of your needs for what kinds of data you're storing. Warranties, invoices, projects, etc. On the lower left, standard metadata types. All of the stuff that you can create and edit in setup. Validation rules, formula fields, account settings, custom object translations, custom fields themselves. It's all metadata that controls the way the application works. And for a long time, those three quadrants were all we had in Salesforce. But custom metadata types fill in the last part. Metadata controls how the application works. It is not business data, but with custom metadata types, you can define what kind of metadata that is. You can think of them as custom objects, but for metadata. In fact, some of you might be using custom objects this way already. Does anyone have a custom object in their organization that's like the setup object or the config object? I see at least one hand. We know people are using them that way. So you might be wondering, Carolyn, why did you guys bother creating custom metadata types? We could just be using custom objects. And the reason is that using metadata objects for that kind of configuration give you some huge advantages. And I want to go through one of them with this example. In this example, I'm an admin. I'm creating an app that lets me create warranty records. And like a good admin, I'm doing this in a sandbox first, and later I want to push it to my production org. So the first thing I do is I create a warranty __c custom object. And I create some fields on that object, and I create some sample data in that table. When I'm ready to push this to production, I can't push the whole thing to production in a change set. I can push the custom object, and I can push the fields on the custom object, but I can't push the data rows. And that makes sense, right? It's not real data. It's not business data. It's not warranties that I've actually sold. That's all stuff that's stuck in my sandbox. But I can push the metadata. That's great for the custom object, but maybe that's not the only kind of data I need for my application. For this application, I also have some warranty settings. And these help me see, oh, a television warranty by default should last 12 months, a computer warranty for 12 months, or a refrigerator for 16 months, that kind of thing. They're still records. It's the kind of thing that powers how the app works. And when I'm ready to push my application from sandbox to production, I do want this to come with me. I can do that with custom metadata types, because in custom metadata types, the rows are metadata, not data. And you can push metadata from sandbox to production with change sets. The same is true for packages. You can put metadata in packages. So you can package the rows of custom metadata types, something that you cannot do with custom objects. At its core, that's one of the biggest advantages of custom metadata types over custom objects for storing this kind of application configuration. I also want to touch on relationships. You can create relationships between data objects. This is probably really familiar to everybody. There was a relationship between contacts and accounts. You can do that because they're both data objects. You can create relationships between two data objects. You can also create relationships between two metadata objects. So a custom metadata type can have a lookup to another custom metadata type because they're both metadata. In this example, my warranty settings custom metadata type has a lookup to another custom metadata type that represents country information. But custom metadata types aren't the only kind of metadata in an organization. There are other kinds of metadata, like entity definitions. So you can create relationships between custom metadata types and entity definitions because they're both kinds of metadata. I can even take that a step further. If I have a relationship to another entity definition on my custom metadata type, I can create a lookup to a field on that entity definition. So what's happening in this example is I have a custom metadata type that represents how many days of an SLA, how many days I have before I violate an SLA. And that number of days varies based on what table I'm talking about. And it's different for account, lead, and invoice. This way I can store which field on which object I should look at to figure out whether the correct amount of time has passed to see if I violated that SLA. Wow. Yeah, wow. Those are two examples. We have a lot more examples of advantages of custom metadata types over custom objects, and also over list custom settings. List custom settings were kind of custom metadata types 1.0. They're really similar to custom objects in implementation, and so they have a lot of the same limitations as custom objects. I want to go through a few of these. With custom metadata types, since the records are metadata, they don't change as often as data objects. That allows us to cache the records in a way that we can't do with data, which means that we can give you unlimited calls and SOQL queries against custom metadata type records. So you're not going to hit your limits with queries against custom metadata types. A lot of these are very packaging focused. I do want to point out you can see the setup audit trail history of records of custom metadata types, which is really cool. If you were using custom objects for that kind of thing, you would have to use field history tracking. But since custom metadata types are metadata, and the setup audit trail tracks metadata, you can see their history in the setup audit trail. And now I want to point out the last two rows. These are new features that we've done in the last few releases. We have native Apex support for creating and updating the records of custom metadata types. And if you're interested in that, look up the, what's the right wording of it? The metadata API in Apex.
Apex Metadata API.
I always get that wrong the first time. I
have to think about it for a minute.
It's new, it's fun, it's awesome, you should look it up. And the last row, you can reference individual records of custom metadata types in validation rule formulas, and we're gonna have a demo of that in a bit. So we're going to move on now to how admins use custom metadata types in particular. I'm gonna do the first example, and then I'm gonna hand it off to Avrom to go through the rest. The first example we have of how admins use custom metadata types with clicks, not code, is in flows. Flows allow you to do a record lookup to say, if I'm updating one record and I want to change a value based on another record, I have to look up that record first. That record lookup allows you to find records of custom metadata types. I know this is really tiny, but what's happening here is, back to my warranty setting example, if this flow is creating a new warranty, if it knows which product the customer is trying to create a warranty for, it can look up the warranty setting record for that product and get the term length in months, how long that warranty should be by default. It's the kind of thing that you could hard code in a formula field, or you could hard code in a default value field, but then when it changes in the future, you have to go back and edit your field definition. And it's much, much simpler if stuff changes to go and edit the values of custom metadata type records instead. I'm going to hand it off to Avrom to talk about our next few examples.
Okay. So before we dive into the brand new and future stuff, I want to talk about one use case for custom metadata types that's not actually no code. I'm curious, how many people here ever write Apex? Okay, a good solid handful. When we first created custom metadata types, the idea was that you would create a custom metadata type and you would create a fairly complicated Apex-based application around it, and then an admin could create records of the type to configure the application declaratively. But there's another big use case for using custom metadata types in code, even if you're not creating a great big Apex-based application about it, but just making a little trigger or making a controller for some UI, and that's to basically use them as configurable constants. How many people here have heard the term magic literal? Or possibly, in some cases, magic number? Okay, one person. So magic literal is basically something that's hard-coded in code. It's a particular value, like, say, the minimum discount you can, or the maximum discount you can have on something is 25%. If you just have the number 0.25 somewhere in your code, that counts as a magic literal. It's hard to figure out what it does. Kind of a step up from that is to create a constant somewhere in your code where you have a constant maximum discount equals 0.25, and then in other places in your code, you refer to it as max discount. That has one advantage, which is that it's more auto-documenting. Someone reading the code can easily see what exactly it's doing there rather than seeing 0.25 and having no idea what the 0.25 is in reference to. But there are a couple of advantages of actually storing literals that you're going to use in code in custom metadata records. One is the ease of change. Carolyn talked about a good admin making the changes in Sandbox. Unlike Apex, you can change custom metadata in production. How many people here ever change any configuration in production ever? Of course you do. If your minimum discount changes, and it's not going to affect things that you need to run Apex tests on, you can change it directly in production if it's a custom metadata record. You can also change it in Sandbox and deploy it over. Some constants also you don't want to have the same everywhere. You might have, say, a URL that's one URL that you want to use in Sandbox, and another URL that you want to use in your full acceptance testing Sandbox, and a third URL that you actually want to use in production. And again, simply by skipping deployment on the record, you could set that in each environment separately. You don't have to have different Apex code running in each environment. Let's go on to the next one. There are kind of two ways to implement this. The first is what we're seeing here, which is kind of a fixed map from fields of potentially different types in a custom metadata type. So here are our fields to just constant values. In this custom metadata type, we have a single record, and we have some constant values for each of those fields. And the way we can get it is in Apex, we can just do a simple SOQL query that is, as Carolyn said, free. It's not towards the 100 queries per transaction limit. Since we have only one record, we don't even need a where clause. We're just saying we want all three of those. And then we can use those as we'd use field values on a custom object. From the perspective of querying, it really works very much like a regular custom object would. Some nice things about this are the strong typing. These can all have different types. We have 2% and a number. You don't get a lot of errors because if I misspell min quant, like I forgot that it was abbreviated and type in quantity, I'll actually get a compile error here. I mean, it will tell me immediately that that's wrong. Disadvantage is that a custom metadata type can only have 100 fields on it. So there's only so extensible that this mechanism is. Let's go on to the next one, though. The next one is to have sort of a variable map of records to constants. And here, basically, we only have one custom field in this custom metadata type percent constants called value. And we have different values represented as different records. And here, we query it by basically the name, max discount, if we want to know about the max discount. And then we pull the value. And you can have a lot more than 100 values this way, because you can have thousands and thousands of records. If you don't want to always retrieve the exact same constant in a particular place, but like you wanted to retrieve different constants based on user input, this is just a string, so you could pass in a variable string there. Disadvantage is that either you have to all have these, one field can only have one type, so they all have to be the same type. If you wanted to, you could make them all numbers or make them all text and do the conversion in Apex, but assuming you don't want to do that, then it's really kind of only appropriate if you're going to group things of similar type together. And this being just a string is great for purposes of flexibility and dynamism, but if I type in maximum discount, I won't get a compile error here because it's just a string. What I'll get instead is could not find record error when I try to run that. Let's go on. OK. Now we're going back. All those people who absolutely detest even a tiny bit of Apex code can breathe a sigh of relief, because we're going back to custom metadata records and validation rules. And as a matter of fact, what we just released was not spring, was it? It was winter.
Wasn't it spring? Spring was last weekend.
Spring was last weekend. OK, then it is a pilot in spring.
Yeah.
We develop like 6 months ahead of the release cycle, so we
So
have no
it's easy
concept
for us to
of
forget
which
exactly
release
which
name
release
goes with
is
what.
currently out.
Yes.
Sorry?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it's piloted in 2.2.
Yes, it's 2.12. So this is already available to you guys in a pilot program. You contact your Salesforce representative to get in on the pilot. It lets you refer to values of fields on custom metadata records from validation rules anywhere. You can have several validation rules that need the same constant. This lets you just change them in one place rather than having to edit all the validation rules individually. This is a forward-looking statement, obviously, but we're actually hoping to get them generally available next release, in the coming release. We're getting pretty close, I think.
We're getting there.
OK. Oh, sorry. I think I've got a couple more slides before we change places.
I know what we're doing.
Yes. So I'm showing you, and there's some nice UI help for this, but I'm going to show you what the formulas look like to start with. And a formula that refers to a value from a custom metadata record has 4 parts, basically. It has $ custom metadata, just to say I'm talking about a value from a custom metadata record here. Then there's the API name of the type. And custom metadata API type names always need _ MDT at the end. It's just like _ C for custom objects. And then I have the API name of the record. Records don't have a suffix. And then I have the API name of a field. And of course, if that's a custom field, it needs the _ C, like any custom field. So for example, I want a custom metadata record. The type is %constants _ MDT. I want the max discount record, and I want the value _ C value for that record. Let's go. I think there's one.
No.
No, no more?
I think it's the demo now.
Oh, yes, you're right. It's the demo. OK, I'll do this part from here and flip on over to an organization in which I want to develop a validation role based on a custom metadata type. So I'm going to show you all the parts of this. For those of you who haven't created custom metadata types, over here in Setup, I'm just going to search. It's actually still under custom code because we haven't gotten around to moving it yet, even though it's not only for custom code anymore. And I'm going to create a new custom metadata type. And I'm going to call this type discount constants. Whoops. Discount constants. Constant. Discount constants. Plural. I'm not going to bother describing it right now. But as you can see, there's a lot like making a new custom object. There's really nothing terribly special about it. And I'm going to create a new custom field on it. And we'll make this a % field. And I'm just going to call it value. I'm pretty sure that no discount is going to have more than 2 digits to the left of the decimal place. If it does, then we're actually paying people to take our product. I'll give it 2 digits afterwards as well. Field name's value. I'm not going to bother with any of the rest of this stuff. But we're going to go ahead and save this. And now that I've got this custom metadata type, I can make a record of it. This is a layoutable user interface, so it starts with kind of the default layout, but you can edit the layout if you want. Let's create a new one called max discount. And we'll give it the value 25%. And go ahead and save it. I could create a lot of other records for a lot of other constants, but this is the one we're interested in. Now I'm going to go over here to my opportunity product discount field. I've had to do a little bit of stuff to prep this, turned on FLS, I've added it to the layout so we can actually sort of see it working. But I'm going to make a do validation rule. And we're going to call this max discount. And I'm going to say that discount percent C, which I think is the API name of this field. Actually, why don't I just go ahead and insert it to make sure.
I was going to say, you trust yourself a lot there.
Yeah, I shouldn't. Opportunity product. Nope. It's just discount.
We should fix that example.
Yeah. I don't know why it says discount percent C. Because we're going to throw an error if the discount is greater than, and I can actually use this insert field because it has custom metadata there. We have just one type, discount constant. We have just one record, max discount. And I'm going to pop in the value. And as you can see, the syntax it used was the syntax that I showed you earlier, basically, where we've got $sign custom metadata, the type, the record, and the field. Make sure I did it right. Yay. Oh, the syntax was right, but I do need, there we go. Let's save that. OK, we've added the error condition, the validation rule. And we'll go ahead and edit here. And we remember we set that max at 25. So I'm going to go discount of 50. And we're going to try to save. And the discount is too high. Now, I could have just typed the 0.25 into that formula. But this way, if I have 25 as cross discount fields on a variety of different objects, I only have to change the value in the one place. And now, I believe that I can go ahead and pass this back to Carolyn.
Thank you. So where are we going next with this? We've got kind of our toe in the water of exposing custom metadata types in declarative functionality with validation rule formulas. Like we said before, we're expecting to GA this in summer 18. Where we want to go next with it is introducing the same thing in formula fields, in default value formulas. So when you have a text field, you want a default value there. You might want to reference a custom metadata type record there. We want to bring it to workflow rules. We want to bring it to process builder. It's already available in flows, as I said before. That's been GA for a while. We're really excited about this roadmap. I'm really excited about this roadmap. So let me call you to action, how you can get started using custom metadata types. We have, you can join the validation rule pilot program since it's in pilot in Spring 18 right now. So this is available for your developer orgs and your sandboxes. You can contact support to get started with that. They'll put you in touch with the process. We have a trailhead for custom metadata types. It's got a really cool badge, like an Indiana Jones hat on it. I really like that badge. The trailhead is a little more Apex focused, but it has some great examples of how you can use custom metadata types as more of a mapping tool to map one value to another. And I also want to point out one of our awesome admins, Jennifer Lee, has a great blog with a lot of examples of how she as an admin uses custom metadata types. So I highly recommend checking out that blog and that particular tag on her blog. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for coming, and we can take questions.
If different users, as opposed to different customers, had different maximum discount percentages, then yes, that would have made sense to do that as a hierarchical custom setting.
But you were talking about different customers. You might have that. So you might look up.
That would have to be a field on account then, I think, to do it that way.
A field on the account to a custom metadata type. You can't do a lookup to a custom metadata type from an object.
No, you cannot yet do that.
No. That's where the formulas will be really nice.
I totally agree. Yes.
Just for clarity, what is the difference between custom metadata types and custom settings?
I'm happy to.
Go for it.
Okay. So custom settings basically have a few features that they share with custom metadata types. They are also kind of like custom objects, and you edit them in setup, like you do custom metadata types. There are two different types of custom settings. One is a hierarchical custom setting, and these are custom, and every record of a hierarchical custom setting can be assigned either to an organization, to the whole organization. You only have one of those per setting, a profile, or a user. And basically, a user kind of inherits a melded version of all of the custom settings that sit above them. You can refer to it in Apex code very cheaply. You can refer to it in formulas. The other type is basically just a list of data. It looks more like a custom metadata type. Similarly, you can refer to it very cheaply in Apex, although you cannot refer to those from formulas. And there, the resemblance kind of ends. They're not portable from one sandbox to another. They actually don't support relationships at all, either to each other or to like standard metadata types, or to data for that matter.
They also don't have pick list fields.
They also don't have pick lists.
Long text
They don't
areas.
have long text. So honestly, there are very few cases where I'd recommend using list custom settings anymore. I think.
You have to now
Yes.
actually turn it on.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Nowadays, you actually have to turn those on. Hierarchical custom settings, it really has to do whether it's something like any given user gets a single record that depends on who they are in some way. Whereas with custom metadata types, they're sort of shared organization-wide.
Okay, so if you had an organization-wide custom setting, it's almost the same thing as...
If you had a hierarchical custom setting, then except for the fact that you can only have one of it.
Yeah.
So it's like a single custom metadata record, but you could have other records of the same type. You can't have more custom settings at the organizational level for a hierarchy. The others always have to be below, and any user will only see one record ever.
For some reason, I feel like the structure of these, like my brain just can't wrap around. So like, if I was trying to offer combinations of country and language options, would I create a custom meta type for country with records for different countries, and then like link them to another one that's separate of types of languages?
That's certainly one way you could do it. I mean, you could, in a case of that simple, you could even create a pair of pick lists. But if you had more than you wanted to put in a pick list, so, in a pick list, you can't have more than 1,000 values. And even at 1,000, it's not very UI friendly. You could make a different UI that would be basically, you would select from custom settings. In the object, since we don't have relationships from data to custom settings yet, you just have to copy the value. But you could do that.
You could also do on just one table, though. You could have one table with one field for country and another field for language, if those are the only two values you want to map together.
Yeah, I kind of thought like, so for country, let's say you're supposed to see a specific price book, and you're supposed to see a specific like choices of language or combinations, like that you could store it on one router.
Yeah,
Yep.
if you had combinations, you'd probably want two separate objects with a relationship between them. If it was one country went to one language always, then I think it would make sense to just have one table with the two fields.
So I think I'm missing something. What's the difference between using a custom metadata object and just an object that you store all these values in?
The difference is whether it's going to be business data, like data that your users using regular old Salesforce are going to be using, or whether it's something that controls how the application works, something that you might want to copy from sandbox to production. Because custom metadata...
So I understand that, but what's the difference in terms of functionality? Because I can store in an object types of discounts and the value of the discounts and then refer to them. So what is the advantage of a custom metadata object?
It's things like unlimited SOQL queries against the metadata objects. It's things like being able to move them between sandboxes, being able to put them in packages,
So
things like that.
data in the metadata object can be moved between.
Yes. Yes. And also things like, the static references from formulas. If you had something that just listed, a bunch of constant percents, it's not clear how you would, for example, refer to it in a validation rule on a basically unrelated object, particularly in such a way that someone wouldn't mistakenly delete the row of data, which would invalidate the validation rule. A user, or even yourself as an admin. I mean, for example, if you refer to a custom metadata record in a validation rule and you try to delete the record, it will say, we can't do this because you're referring to it in this validation rule. So it goes back to the validation rule. And if you deploy the validation rule from Sandbox and you look at the, find dependencies, it will find that record as a dependency.
So hanging on from that question, so because this is metadata, does that mean it doesn't count towards your storage limits as well? If you just use it as
It has a separate storage limit. So it doesn't count it against your normal data storage limits. We have a limit of 100 custom metadata types in a particular org.
That's correct. Yes. And all of basically if you take the types times the size of the fields in each type times the number of records, you can only have, at least by default, unless you get an increase, you can have
Yes.
10 megabytes. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. I always say that. It's wrong. 10 million characters worth of data. So it doesn't matter what the encoding is. So if you have a Japanese organization, you can still have 10 million Japanese characters, even though that's actually more like 30 million bytes.
So what of this is already available and what of this is on the roadmap?
Everything not related to formulas is already available. Well, sorry, formulas, including formulas and validation rules. Those are, general availability is on the roadmap, although, like I said, you can get into a pilot for it now.
And do we have access to this deck that you showed us?
I
I believe it will be distributed later on the London's Calling site.
Yeah. I think that's the case.
This ethics metadata API, is it available as a pilot?
It's
That was GA.
That's generally
Yes.
available.
Because recently, even last week as well, we tried to create the records in Apex. We couldn't.
So you actually have to look at the documentation for the Apex Metadata API. It's not using insert. You actually can't create them synchronously. What you do is you can create a metadata package and deploy it in Apex. So it's not. I don't think we'll ever be able to support literal synchronous create, but we do want, at some point on the slightly longer term roadmap, to make it a little bit easier so you can start by calling new some custom metadata record and populate it. And then we might provide a utility, which will transform that into what you need to save. But that isn't available yet.
If you could have just a straight up synchronous insert of custom metadata records in Apex, it would make it impossible to package a custom metadata type and Apex referring to it in the same package and then deploy it, because it would never be valid until that type got installed into that org.
There's also, some questions like with mixed transactions. What if you change a custom metadata value that's referred to then by a validation rule? Because of the way caching works, you won't always see the change until the end of that transaction, and yeah.
It counts against the system objects.
Sorry?
It counts against the system objects.
The
Fixed DML operation that you got.
No, it actually counts against your metadata deploys, your metadata API deploys.
Classic and Lightning, this applies in Classic.
This is true. This is independent of your UI technology.
The only real UI we have for custom metadata types is the setup UI that we just showed you.
And as you saw, even though I had Lightning on, it's kind of a classic looking UI. But
Could have sworn I saw a question. Yes.
Just if you wanted to have some setup to be translative, you still need to use custom levels. Because I know custom levels are not available
We,
in formula or validation rules. So custom metadata is great, but there is no way to translate.
there is not currently a way to translate custom metadata.
Not
That's true.
yet.
Not yet.
Cool. I think we got all the questions. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Off to.